Ring of Honor. We both heard from a lot of people suggesting we check out Ring of Honor. They have new programming out right now. And you, I guess, watched it before I did, because you're the one who said we are going to watch this, so find a way to watch it.
Yeah, I said this is the way this is going to be. Right? This is the way this is going to work, pal.
There's been a lot of talk the last few years about a sports-based presentation. I can tell you, I don't know how things turned out, but when you first went to Ring of Honor, whatever, 2010 or so, this is something we talked about, was the idea of a sports-based presentation that's completely and radically different from the world of WWE because it's treated seriously. And I will stop now and go to you for your thoughts about Ring of Honor, the first episode of their pure title tournament.
Well, I'm not going to go into a ton of the history here. We've talked about it before. One of the ways that we sold Ring of Honor to Sinclair Broadcasting, the concept of Ring of Honor, was not just as another wrestling promotion doing the same stuff as the other ones were doing. Why would they want to buy something like that when it would, if you don't buy something that's going to do the same thing as somebody else when they're already established and spending a lot more money at it? You go for a different type of product. And so many of the Ring of Honor guys were also training in MMA or had training in some type of legitimate wrestling that we thought, since, especially because UFC, that was their hottest on television and pay-per-view, that's the way that we made it palatable to Sinclair Broadcasting, who didn't grow up as wrestling fans. Well, look how hot mixed martial arts is now. And this is young guys that haven't been on TV for the other companies that really hit hard, and it's athletic, and they have training, blah, blah, blah. It was a different concept, and that could resonate. That's how you get things on television. It's not the greatest wrestling program in the world. It's whether or not that the executive believes it's something different than they can see elsewhere. And we've also gone over the history that they didn't exactly spend any money for the first few years. But a lot of people scoffed at the concept. I think it's better now than it was then, timing, and I'll tell you why before we talk about the program. It's a brilliant way to begin re-educating people when we're in a pandemic. They're not having to sell tickets. Nobody's having to save the amount of tickets you can sell. You ought to be able to fucking sell. If you can't sell 500 fucking tickets to a TV taping and you're on national television, you need to fold your fucking tent, whatever town you're in. You don't need to sell tickets, which means you don't really need to do that many angles, which means now is a perfect time not only to build your stars, but build your style and explain to your viewers the basis, the logic of your universe. What are we presenting here? Is it a goddamn just a mess of conflicting styles and conflicting presentations, and this is phony, but this looks real, and this is all over the fucking map, and who's doing what to who, and who's on whose side, we don't know. It's just chaos. Or do you slow down and begin the education process that professional wrestling has used since the dawn of professional wrestling? And whether television was invented or radio was invented or fucking high def was invented and streaming was invented, these basic principles don't change about anything, not just wrestling. You educate people to who your stars are, who your top players are, who your main athletes are, whatever endeavor. Who's the top people? What are their backgrounds? Who do they like and who are they mad at? What are they going for? That's the logic of your universe. You don't have a phony fucking comedy match immediately followed by something that's deadly serious, and while people are still fucking laughing, you've established that you're horse shit, and then you're expecting people to fucking cry like it's fucking Shakespeare. They're not going 100 miles an hour with angles and violence. They are starting an education process while they have a pandemic. This is perfect style for an empty arena because it's sport, it's athleticism, It's not guys doing hokey shit in front of no people, which makes it look even hokier, as we've mentioned many times. and a lot of people are going to say, well, this is boring. Who wants to watch this? This television this is why this is the brilliant part of this. I think they have realized that they don't have to sell tickets. They don't have to do angles and top everything for pay-per-view and blah, blah, blah. They have to provide programming, and they can provide quality programming that a wrestling fan would want to watch, and at the same time have a long-term plan and do something positive for the future of their business. Last week, AEW had a street fight between a middle card tag team at best and guys Santana and Ortiz that they'd like to use on top, where they just about killed each other and were bleeding like stuck hogs, not just in an empty arena, but in a parking lot where they wouldn't have had any fans anyway, just to do it on television and then shit on it at the end with the fucking comedy to begin with. How are they going to top that? When you can sell tickets again, what angle are you going to shoot? What damage are you going to do to somebody that can impact people in a more major way than seeing some guy get double fucking powerbombed through the windshield of a real car? But with what Ring of Honor was doing, they're providing good programming for wrestling fans with a thought to the future, because the pressure is not on them now to sell 10,000 tickets. So imagine 2 months into this tournament, or 3 months into this, or however long it is, when they do an angle, or when somebody does cheat, or when somebody does do something beyond the pale of what they've established that their rules are, it will register because it's out of the ordinary. Here's an analogy for you, Brian. You hear all the time in the news, it used to happen a lot more in the older days, but it still does. Somebody either got shot or stabbed because they got caught cheating in a card game, right? That's old as the hills. Well, that's because that usually, even amongst honor amongst thieves, when you got in a card game, even back in the Old West, you were keeping an eye on everybody, but you went into it assuming that everything was on the up and up. And everybody knows that if somebody gets caught cheating at cards, bad shit's going to happen, so they're on their best behavior. And then when somebody does get caught cheating, they get shot or they get stabbed. And then the guy that did it goes to court and probably still gets put in jail, maybe. But a lot of people are going, yeah, so-and-so, he got shot because he got caught cheating at cards, brought it on himself. The cheater, the heel, gets the fucking heat. But what if the situation was that every time you sat down to get in a poker game with somebody, whether they were your friends, you didn't know who they were, whoever it was, not only are there very few rules in poker, but nobody really follows any of them, and it's expected that everybody in the game is going to be cheating at one point or another. When somebody gets caught cheating, whether they get shot or stabbed is immaterial, because if that was the case, then the heat would go on the fucking stabber or the shooter rather than the stabby or the shooty, because well, why were you involved in that thing in the first place? You knew it was fucking crooked. There's no heat because the guy's an idiot for being involved in it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
Basically. So the point is, when they do something, once you establish this was the way that wrestling was created, they didn't just go into it with a set heel and a set baby face. It slowly evolved that the people that fucking cheated were the unpopular people because they cheated when they had to, and the other people didn't, so they were the popular ones. Everything has been overdone and overexposed, so get back to the basic. When there's no pressure on you, establish your athletes, establish what they're going for. And then when you open it up, people will be seeing shit that they haven't seen, at least from your company, from your presentation. And it will register and respond more when you start a brand new program, a brand new promotion. with blood and violence, people getting run over with cars. You got no place to go, and it just becomes gaga. And that's a sign of a mark fucking booking. When you have some level of restraint and expose people to who you want to be your stars, what you want the rules of your promotion to be, what you want the logic of the promotion to be, and then you start feeding in the wild characters that go against the grain, they stand out. It's not that fucking hard, but nobody else is doing it or has done it. But Ring of Honor is apparently doing it. The first episode of their Pure Wrestling tournament is the first time they came back to taping live matches and new content. And they're doing it in an empty building in Baltimore. But as I said, this is not egregiously bad in an empty arena because that's for the same reason that I think Charlotte and Rhea Ripley got over better than anything else at WrestleMania practically, was because they actually worked a contest and it worked. Instead of doing the pro wrestling gaga, the more gaga, it doesn't work unless there's people there, which we'll see when we watch Hogan and Rock from WrestleMania 18 here later. Because, boy, in an empty building, you'd have been looking at a different match. But this program, they did a new open package, great, a professional voiceover, not just one of the regular announcers, talking about the Pure tournament, the history of the Pure title. They used it before back in the previous era of Ring of Honor. So they've got tape of CM Punk and Samoa Joe and Nigel McGuinness with the belt. They set up the history of the Pure Championship. And then I got to be honest, I haven't watched Ring of Honor in ages. I said this on the program last week. For a while there, I was mad at Greg the Office Boy, and I would watch every so often if it was somebody I was interested in. And then when the Elite Petite took over the whole thing and held it hostage, I didn't watch anything. So I haven't seen any of these guys or any of this programming in a while. Quinn McKay. It's a young lady, not Quinn Martin, who was a producer of fine television programming in the 60s and 70s, but Quinn McKay was the host who introduced the tournament concept, the rules that were backed up by graphics and B-roll, the A and B block of the tournament. They're doing it very sports-like. She's got a good personality. I thought she was well-spoken. I guess she's homegrown there. I've not seen her on any other programming. She's a perky little thing. Because the opening required so much explanation verbally, even with the B-roll and the graphics, I would have had another announcer just to be able to bounce back and forth so you had a different voice in there because it was like 3 minutes long. But that's minor criticism and possibly due to the pandemic may not have been a possible thing. But otherwise than that, it was like watching a regional sports program, a tournament of any kind, whether it be basketball, baseball, fucking car racing, whatever the fuck. They opened up, explained the concept, explained the rules and the graphics with the pairings in the tournament in a very easy to understand and logical fashion. So even though it was a little talky at the start of the program, it flew by because you were getting information that you didn't tune out because it didn't sound fucking delusional, like Reverse Battle Royal or whatever. What'd you think?
There is very little bad I could say about this show. This was a great wrestling episode, great wrestling show. I thought Quinn McKay was fine at the top. I agree with you. I mean, it probably would have helped to have her bounce back and forth with someone, but either they didn't want to do that or because of COVID, they didn't want another person in that studio. I don't know, but
I thought
she was fine.
She was pre-taped. Then the announcers were Ian Riccoboni and Caprice Coleman. All the announcers did a tremendous job on this program.
Let me stop you right there, because I haven't heard Ian Riccoboni since, if that is how you pronounce his last name, I apologize.
I think it is. I worked with him. And
then you would know.
Talked to him. I think it is Ian Riccoboni.
Because I pronounced it differently in the past. But
okay.
I think the last time I heard him was on, whether it was All In or one of those pay-per-views before AEW.
No, it was the that's where I worked with him on the NWA Crockett Cup.
Yeah, I didn't watch that.
Well, you motherfucker.
I didn't watch that, but I haven't heard him in a long time. I don't watch Ring of Honor. We watch a lot of wrestling. Mauro Ranallo is now seemingly done with wrestling for the time being. His replacement on NXT, Vic Joseph, has been all right. But after hearing this, I think Ian Riccoboni may be the best guy in the business right now. He was fantastic throughout the entire night. Not to take anything away from Caprice Coleman, but Ian was fantastic.
Well, see, the thing is, Caprice sounds like a color guy is supposed to sound. He sounds like an ex-wrestler that has the jock mentality and knows the inside terms and can speak to it like a color analyst should, but he doesn't sound like a professional broadcaster. Ian knows his shit and was well prepared and had his notes and had his facts, but also sounds like a professional announcer. So that's Caprice is more folksy, but he did a great job. They work well together. And, that's the point. That at some points, the announcing here sounded again like any other sports program. Whether the analysis or the calling of the action, it wasn't over-the-top wrestling. It was sports. Anyway, they did packages, the first match of 2 on the program. They did sit-down packages with each of the competitors. And not just the bullshit sit-downs that, with the bad, drama and scripting that we've been seeing, but they could have been UFC packages. Jay Lethal's was first, and he, talked about his history. He was in Ring of Honor early. He's been a wrestler because he started when he was 16. He's been a wrestler like almost 20 years. He spent most of it in Ring of Honor. They have that history and the footage. Talked about his first round match against Dalton Castle, who's another former champion. He came along after I was there. I've heard some good things about him. I've seen him a time or two. He had the boys thing and the whole fucking gimmick, and I wasn't sure, right? But anyway, the Lethal package was very good. I've always been a big Jay Lethal fan, but then Dalton Castle, the package comes on, and I'm like, well, he's got glasses on, and he got kind of the voice, and I'm ready to shit on it. He doesn't have an intimidating look or voice, but the way they did this package worked for me. They showed him in his high school wrestling pictures and talked about that background and had footage that made him seem legit. And then as a former pro champion, this was a guy talking about wrestling like he and it was real. And he was going to show that he's not just entertainment. They made a nod to the flamboyance that he's done in the past in a different style of wrestling, but this is a pure tournament, blah, blah, blah. It fit. It makes sense. And nobody's going, well, that's bullshit. And all these guys talked about in the sit-downs, they talked about their athletic backgrounds and their training and their credentials and what they've done to become a great pro wrestler. Traveling the world or training with different people. Even they mentioned some trainers that may not be household names, but they talked about them like they were trainers that would train and teach you something. So anyway, the sit downs set it up, and then they have the match. And imagine this, graphics and statistics. I saw on the cable guide, Brian, one of the programs that's on national cable, the description says a league formed in 2019 that introduces statistics and analytics to the game. But they didn't. Ring of Honor does. The statistics and the graphics and the analysis mean something. For Dalton Castle, they mentioned he'd won 85% of his matches with his finish, the Bangarang, since 2018. He's 4-1 in his last 5 matches. He could have got beat 17 times in a row last year. We're not talking about that. It's positive fucking information. Jay Lethal, 3-0 in his last 3 bouts against Dalton Castle. Well, that's pertinent. He's won 88% of his Ring of Honor single matches he's had in Baltimore. Well, that's interesting. Everything's positive. Then they go to the tail of the tape. I've written a few tales of the tape. We were the only company doing it in 2000. 11 and 12, 10, 11 and 12, and we're doing it again. We're doing it. They're doing it again. Maybe they still do it. I don't know. It's a fucking athletic contest. Takes 15 seconds. Tail of the tape. Boom. They've got a nice arena. They got the video screens, the lighting look. Yes, it's an empty arena, but they also talked about the protocols for COVID. They didn't ignore it like fucking Fantasyland across the street. They talked about the protocols that were in place so that they could do this like any other sports program would. The announcers reinforcing the rules during the course of the commentary was easy for them because the rules are easy to fuck. Once that they're set a time or two, you get it. You get a certain amount of rope breaks, and those rope breaks are called each time. And after you exceed that number, then you blah, blah, blah. You know, no closed fist punches to the fucking head or face. First one's a warning. The next one's a disqualification. Simple shit. As far as the match, Dalton Castle, by the way, and I guess he broke his back at one point a few years ago, and he worked through quite a bit of it. I think last time I saw him, he was a little heavier, and he's wearing a back brace now, but he's got that fucking suplex strength where he can just take a guy and get down low and fucking launch him. And they did a really nice mix of wrestling and pro style stuff. They start working, it's solid, except fucking Dalton Castle, head palm shoot off. I would have docked him a point. Actually, I'd start fining for those in the locker room, but I would dock him a point publicly for a head palm shoot off. But other than that, they had a nice match, and they paid attention to their fucking work so that everything meant as much as it could, and it looked like something rather than just trying to concentrate on the next spot or dive they were doing because they weren't doing that shit. And then they open it up toward the last few minutes. The clock on the screen, you got a clock on the screen every second because they're 15-minute time limits. You know where you are time-wise. They almost used it. I think they went around 13. But they opened up really full pro style in the closing moments because that's when it's supposed to get more exciting. And guess what? Boom. Jay Lethal hit his finish, the lethal injection, and beat him 1, 2, 3. And then they shook hands, observed the code of honor, which again works here due to the presentation. It used to give me some fits trying to figure out how most people would adhere to the code of honor because the real heels were the ones that wouldn't. And sometimes it got in the way, but here it works. And it's a requirement that the code of honor, the handshake, starts and finishes every contest. And the first time that somebody spits in the other guy's hand or fucking kicks him in the balls, they're going to have a non-existent riot because there still won't be any fans, but it'll get over. What'd you think of the match?
I thought it was really good. To take a step back, I love the pre-match packages and sit-down interviews with both guys. It didn't come across, sometimes WWE has done sit-down interviews with guys, and it seems like they're repeating lines they memorized.
Yeah.
They don't seem genuine. They didn't insult our intelligence at all on this, but they both seemed genuine. They both seemed like they were saying what they believed, talking about their real backgrounds. This whole presentation, from the interviews to the archival footage to the match, was fantastic. The referee did a good job. That Todd Sinclair, I haven't watched Ring of Honor in years. He does not age. He looks exactly the same as I remember him looking 15 years ago. Really good. I gotta say one thing, Todd. Please lose some weight. I'm scared you're going to have a heart attack. Todd is a little portly, but he would get out there and work every match, every Ring of Honor match on a show. Sometimes when he was the only referee, and his face would be as red as a goddamn fire engine. Please, Todd, you're getting older. Go on a diet. I'd hate to see you fucking have a heart attack, but he's a very good referee. But really enjoyed the match, enjoyed there being a time limit, enjoyed the clock on the screen, liked the rope breaks meaning something, liked it. Everything meant something. I can't I have nothing negative I could say. The commentary was fantastic.
Strategy. It's strategy that you can use also when you're forced to use your allotted rope breaks early, and then you've got no way to get out of a hold, and then that may be where somebody fucking sticks a finger up somebody's ass behind the referee's back or whatever. But it can all be used,
and that's where the commentary was so strong, because right away when Jay Lethal went for that rope break as the match started, they made you understand that it was a big deal. He just used up one of his rope breaks in the first 30 seconds of the match.
Exactly. And the second match, real quick, Jonathan Gresham, who is Jay Lethal's tag team partner, they're the current Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champions. But obviously everybody's a single in this tournament, and they referred to that. Jay Lethal, Jonathan Gresham, they both said, we'd love it if that was the final match was between us two, because this is even bigger than the World Tag title. But they recognize what people already know, but then they put it in a proper perspective. And his opponent was Wheeler Yuta, who I saw him a couple times in Ring of Honor. In MLW last year. He's gotten in better shape. He's a young guy, and he was a nervous speaker on his sit down, but it worked for him because you can see this guy being the unheralded newcomer in the UFC, not used to being on television, speaking, but they do the video and the editing on the package, so everybody's being treated equally and being treated as a serious athlete that's trained overseas and etc. So you don't know who the preliminary guys are if you come into this in a vacuum, which is perfect because then you don't know what to expect for the finishes, who to go over. Everybody is being presented here as somewhat of a contender. Jonathan Gresham in his sit down, he was dressed up and looked like a real professional athlete, had the fucking bright tie and everything. He looked like somebody. But then they each put the opponents over verbally. In the match, Gresham is so short. He's so short. I think they gave him a graphic at 5'4", and it's probably legitimate. But he's built. He's built, and they profiled him as an athlete, so it's not visually disturbing. And again, Yuta's bigger and thinner. This guy's shorter and fucking squatter, so you got a contest. Athletic wrestling, and they concentrated on their work again instead of rushing through stuff. And I love the spot. Gresham put an Indian Deathlock on and was slow on the break when Yuta used one of his rope breaks. He was slow on the break because you do need help from that referee was not Todd Sinclair. I think he looked a little confused as to how to break up the Indian Deathlock, but you need help to untie the legs, right? Legitimately. So because they were stuck like that and he didn't get a quick break, Yuta comes up and punches fucking Gresham once right in the fucking face. Gresham goes down and sells it. Yuta gets a warning, but the guy had a reason to sell one punch. Yuta gets a warning, then the tempers flare, and then they open up with faster action. And they go some more pro-style shit. Then Gresham gets figure four, and both of them rolled out to the floor underneath the bottom rope trying to get out of it, and they both sold that. But while Yuta's selling his leg, Gresham gets in the ring and goes nuts on the fucking leg, stomping and jerking and everything, and finally got Yuta down and was bashing. And this looked good. And goddamn, he had some fucking oomph to it. He just bashed Yuta's leg over and over, up and down into the fucking mat until Yuta tapped out on that. And I bought it. I don't know. What'd you think? That was different.
I really liked it. Once again, I loved the pre-match packages. It made me care about the match before I saw the match. One minor complaint, I guess, is Yuta. I think he needs better gear, or it has to fit him better. It looked almost like his pants were going to fall down. Yeah, several times, and they weren't.
Well, I said he'd lost weight.
But the pre-match packages putting over him going to Japan, and both guys traveling around the world to learn their craft so they can be the best pure wrestler out there. The only other complaint I would have is for some of the near falls, you see this a lot in wrestling, but 1, 2, and then almost like a cooperative, let me get off you, let me get ready for the next thing. Minor critique because it was a good match. I really like the finish. I really like the finish a lot. Good match. Again, and once again, I want to say Ian Riccaboni. Riccaboni? It's not Riccabono, I know that.
Riccaboni.
Riccaboni. I think he stole the show throughout the entire event. This was one of the most impressive announcing jobs I've heard anyone in wrestling do in a long time. I thought he was fantastic.
He wasn't over the top.
Not at all. Not at all.
He was so legitimate and conversational with it that it added to the presentation. It was real. And so, I mean, the whole thing is, folks, and we're not getting paid for this now, but I just wanted to illustrate that you can do this if you try. And there's no reason. We're 6 months into a fucking pandemic. The people that had the money and the resources and et cetera to continue to do programming, we all know who they are, could have easily done this. But instead, they've gone further and further into gaga and horse shit and violence and blood and comedy and unbelievable fucking scripted alleged drama, trying to get people to hook viewers, and the ratings stay the same. Let's face it. With wrestling, this is a very abusive relationship that nobody wants to end, but the fans don't like the product in most part. And the fans that do like a product are fiercely loyal to it and are not going to stop watching it almost no matter what. So AEW's got what AEW's got. So does NXT, so does most of the WWE programs. The Raw and SmackDown have lost more just because they had more peripheral fans to begin with. You know, if you just watch the one major program every week, you're not really an engaged fan. So they've lost a few, but it is what it is now. So why hasn't somebody backed up and said, we're going to, for the good of the business, or at least our business, we're going to get back to the basics and educate people to what this actually is. And then when stuff that is not supposed to happen begins happening, it'll stand out and mean something. And that's what Ring of Honor's doing. And it was a great program. It's an hour program. It didn't take me any time to fucking watch it because it went by. Because it wasn't just 100 miles an hour of the same shit, bodies falling everywhere, or stupidity, or bad acting. It was people that meant what they said, telling me what they were going to do, and then going out and doing the best of their ability to do it.
It was sports-based wrestling.
So, and the AEW fans should watch Ring of Honor because then they will see what they were promised. And the rest of the fans should watch this show just so they'll see what this shit looks like in case the WWE ever tries to do it. Raw Underground. You could show a non-wrestling fan this Ring of Honor program and they would understand, even if they didn't like wrestling, they would understand and not mock you or make fun of you for watching something like this because it's athletic guys in a competition. It's not insulting or stupid.
No, like in the 90s, I had friends who didn't like professional wrestling. They would ridicule it. They would mock it. But you show them a Japanese tape, like from All Japan, and they could sit down and watch it. Because it seemed like some sort of athletic contest. Not a bunch of people dancing like clowns or doing a dance routine or a wacky gimmick. It was Stan Hansen knocking the shit out of people. The average person, even if they don't like wrestling, can understand what's going on there. The same way they can when they watch boxing if they don't like boxing. This was really good. Really good job by everyone involved.
So just so everybody knows, if you want to see what it could have been and what it should have been, now you've got a blueprint. I'm interested in seeing the next program.
You gonna watch it?
I'm gonna follow this as best I can.
I watched it on a website. Every commercial break was some commercial for annuities for people over the age of 50.
Well, you got the feed from one of the low power stations. Because actually all the programs that I watch on the weekends have commercials for catheters, old folks' homes, long-term care insurance, and reverse mortgages. So, but it's my favorite shows. Fortunately, I'm in need of none of those products.